So imagine you're watching a primetime television broadcast. You've got this world leader at the podium, right? And they're pounding their fist, just absolutely tearing into a newly proposed international peace deal.
Right, painting a very clear picture.
Exactly. The rhetoric is fierce, the red lines are drawn, and I mean, to anyone watching at home, the negotiations are entirely dead in the water.
Done buried, yeah.
But, and this is the crazy part, if you were to cut away from that broadcast and instantly look at like a satellite feed of the actual battlefield,
Yeah.
you'd see the military quietly halting its advance.
Right.
They're establishing fixed perimeters and functionally acting as though that very same peace deal had already been signed.
It's just a profound cognitive dissonance, isn't it? I mean, we are so conditioned to believe that a nation's foreign policy is dictated by what its leaders say into a microphone.
Totally.
But in these high-stakes environments, that public rhetoric is often just, designed to absorb domestic political pressure. Meanwhile, the actual statecraft is happening completely out of sight.
It's fascinating. And that brings us to today. Welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are getting right into the incredibly complex, deeply polarizing web of Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to war and peace.
And specifically focusing on the breaking August 2026 Board of Peace ceasefire proposals, right?
Yes, exactly. And to untangle this for you, we are pulling from a massive stack today. We've got breaking reports from Sky News, I-24 and New WS, PBS. Plus, we're looking at some really intense, highly analytical debates happening right now across geopolitical forums.
Some really fascinating Reddit threads in there.
Oh, for sure. And we even have some fringe political literature to reveal just, the sheer temperature of global opinions. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We have to start with the sheer whiplash of August 2026. So Donald Trump's Board of Peace, which remember was set up back in late 2025.
Right, featuring some huge names.
Yeah, notably including figures like Tony Blair. So they've just dropped this 15-point plan for Gaza.
And the headline claim from Trump's camp is just massive. I mean, they are stating that Hamas has essentially agreed to lay down its weapons.
Which sounds like a total breakthrough.
It does, but, the fine print contains this huge structural paradox.
Right.
The disarmament is entirely conditional. Hamas is basically saying, sure, we will surrender our arsenals, but only if Israel fully withdraws its forces from the territory first.
Which obviously triggers an immediate volcanic public reaction in Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, our Sky News source details Netanyahu going straight to the cameras to vehemently reject the whole premise. He's demanding real, not fictitious disarmament, which is quite a phrase.
Yeah, he's very specific about it, too.
He is. He goes so far as to publicly categorize, the difference between heavy and less heavy weapons that absolutely must be surrendered before any Israeli movement happens.
Right.
And then he takes it a step further, declaring unequivocally that as long as he is in charge, there will be no Palestinian state. Period.
So if you consume only that broadcast, you'd think the Trump plan is just buried completely. But this is where the I-24 NUWS reporting comes in and reveals what the military apparatus is actually doing while the political apparatus is shouting on TV.
This is the wildest part to me.
Right. A source close to that very Board of Peace indicates that, behind closed doors, Israel is functionally implementing the preliminary phases of this ceasefire roadmap.
The disconnect here is just staggering. I mean, we have the cabinet issuing public denials. We've got the head of Shin Bet, David Zini, actively warning against the agreement.
Very publicly warning against it.
Yeah. Yet, operationally, the IDF has halted offensive maneuvers.
Yeah.
They're reportedly sitting strictly on what is referred to as the yellow line.
Yeah, let's break down the mechanics of that, because the yellow line isn't just some arbitrary boundary they drew on a map,
Right.
It represents a highly calculated, pragmatic military reality. By sitting on this line, the IDF is essentially controlling roughly 53% of the Gaza Strip.
Wow. Just over half.
Exactly. And the key is they aren't trying to occupy every single neighborhood or, densely populated alleyway, because that requires massive troop density.
And constant urban combat, which is incredibly costly.
Exactly. Instead, they are holding these strategic perimeters and the lateral corridors that bisect the territory.
So they essentially control the physical arteries of the region.
Right.
They control what moves north, south, east, and west without actually having to maintain a static presence inside the most hostile urban centers.
Precisely. Controlling 53% via these strategic arteries, well, it achieves the necessary security leverage without the sheer political and military cost of 100% occupation.
Right.
It allows the military to quietly de-escalate and implicitly signal compliance with these international back channels, all while the political leadership maintains this posture of total defiance for their domestic base.
You know, it makes me think of it's like a high-stakes corporate negotiation.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine the CEO is on television threatening to burn the deal to the ground, yelling about red lines. But down in the warehouse, the logistics team is literally already loading the delivery trucks based on the new contract.
That is a perfect analogy. That is the exact utility of a massive gap between public posturing and private action.
Yeah.
I mean, a leader relying on a very fragile domestic coalition, they need to project absolute, uncompromising strength just to survive a no-confidence vote.
Right. It's about political survival.
Exactly, while simultaneously authorizing de-escalation behind the scenes to secure tactical advantages and, appease key global allies like the U.S.
But, to understand how a leader becomes comfortable operating with such a dizzying chasm between their words and their actions, we really have to look backward.
We do.
Because if you follow the geopolitical discourse, and we looked at the debates on forums like the Change Me View subreddit, which are incredibly well documented on this dual-track methodology is not new.
Not at all.
It is the exact same playbook Netanyahu used in his pre-2023 strategy.
The historical context is so vital here, because that pre-2023 paradigm is probably one of the most heavily scrutinized geopolitical strategies of our modern era.
Oh, absolutely.
The core accusation being debated online is whether the Israeli government intentionally sabotaged the possibility of a two-state solution by actively propping up its own worst enemy.
And the users on Reddit, they bring some heavy receipts to back that up. They point to this 2019 Likud faction meeting where Netanyahu allegedly stated, quote, "Whoever wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state needs to support the strengthening and financing of Hamas."
Right.
And they couple that with his finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, stating on the record back in 2015 that Hamas was, quote, "an asset."
Yeah, and when you present those purely as quotes, it sounds like an unhinged desire for perpetual conflict. Right?
It sounds like comic book villain stuff.
Exactly. But the underlying mechanics of that policy, the actual realpolitik, were incredibly clinical. The objective wasn't violence for the sake of violence. The objective was political gridlock.
Okay, walk me through the actual calculus there.
Yeah.
Because on its face, actively facilitating the flow of resources to an organization whose foundational charter literally calls for your destruction.
Yeah.
That sounds strategically suicidal. So how did this actually function on the ground?
So the mechanism was rooted in exploiting internal Palestinian divisions. You had the Palestinian Authority, the PA, holding administrative control in the West Bank,
Right.
and Hamas governing the Gaza Strip. So by allowing financial lifelines into Gaza specifically, we're talking about millions of dollars in Qatari cash, the Israeli defense establishment basically ensured that Hamas remained just capable enough to maintain its grip on the territory.
Wow.
And by doing that, they prevented the Palestinian Authority from ever reuniting the two factions.
So it's the ultimate implementation of divide and conquer.
Exactly.
If the leadership in Ramallah and the leadership in Gaza despise each other and operate as these completely separate fiefdoms, there's no single, unified representative body that can legally or functionally sign a binding treaty for a sovereign Palestinian state.
Right. And this wasn't just a blind eye being turned either. This was active facilitation.
Yeah, explain that part, because it's wild.
We are talking about Qatari envoys literally crossing through Israeli-controlled checkpoints with suitcases of cash.
Suitcases of cash.
Suitcases of cash coordinated by the Israeli security apparatus. The mechanism of that cash flow was the lever used to freeze the conflict. By ensuring the Palestinians remained politically fractured, Netanyahu's government essentially bought itself years of time.
Time to focus on the broader regional chessboard.
Exactly. The grand strategy assumed that the Palestinian issue could be bypassed entirely if Israel could just finalize major peace treaties with the broader Arab world.
Like the Abraham Accords.
Yes, the Abraham Accords with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and eventually, the big push for Saudi normalization. The calculation was that isolating the Palestinian issue regionally while dealing with the larger existential threat of Iran's nuclear program was just the only pragmatic path forward.
But there was a massive corollary to this strategy right around 2020 and 2021, which was this doctrine of shrinking the conflict or economic peace.
Yes.
And this is where the logic really starts to buckle for me. The idea was that by increasing Qatari aid for infrastructure and drastically increasing the number of work permits for Gazans to earn higher wages inside Israel, you could somehow neutralize the ideological threat.
Yeah, it was an attempt to turn a deeply entrenched, century-old territorial and religious conflict into a purely economic equation.
Right.
The flawed assumption was that if you facilitate a rising standard of living, like if people have a reliable income, a home, maybe a semblance of a middle-class lifestyle, they suddenly have too much to lose to risk it all in a war.
Which assumes that everyone, everywhere, operates purely as a rational economic actor.
Exactly.
But how do you apply a spreadsheet mentality to a militant group driven by a fundamentalist ideology?
Yeah.
You just cannot buy off a deeply entrenched ideological movement with higher daily wages.
You can't. And the catastrophic failure of that specific mechanism, the failure of that economic pressure cooker theory, is what led directly to the collapse of the entire security apparatus on October 7th, 2023.
Yeah.
That event entirely shattered the illusion that an insurgency could be managed like, a hostile corporate asset.
Which forces a massive tectonic shift in the rhetoric. And we see this clearly in the PBS News reports we looked at from early 2024.
Right, a total pivot.
When Hamas presented a 4.5-month, three-phase plan to trade hostages for Palestinian prisoners and a permanent end to the war, Netanyahu didn't just reject it, he labeled it, quote, delusional.
Yes.
The public narrative pivoted entirely from managing the conflict to a demand for absolute victory.
And he pointed to the military metrics at the time to justify that shift, citing that the IDF had already dismantled 18 of the 24 Hamas battalions.
Right. But we have to examine what dismantling a battalion actually means in the context of asymmetric urban warfare.
It's a very specific military term.
Exactly. It does not mean every single fighter has been eliminated or that the ideology has just been erased.
No, not at all. It means degrading their command and control infrastructure. It means taking out the battalion commanders, destroying the weapons caches, and breaking their ability to fight as a cohesive, organized military unit.
Right. But then they immediately dissolve into decentralized guerrilla cells.
Exactly, which is why absolute victory is such a nebulous, almost impossible metric to achieve in that specific environment.
And this brings us to the profound skepticism we see across the global discourse regarding how to actually resolve this. Because there's a fascinating thread on the Israel-Palestine geopolitical forum that serves as a really brilliant exercise in applied statecraft.
Oh, the thought experiment thread, yes.
So the prompt posed to the community was, it is June 2026. If you woke up tomorrow as Benjamin Netanyahu with all the historical baggage, the security constraints, and the domestic political pressures, what would you actually do to secure a lasting peace?
And the responses are deeply revealing, because they really highlight the mechanical impossibility of elegant, simple solutions.
Oh, really?
The moment someone proposes a theoretical fix, the rest of the community immediately stress tests the logistics of it, and the plans just disintegrate.
My absolute favorite example was the suggestion of a massive, neutral, international peacekeeping force.
Right, which comes up all the time.
Right. Because on paper, it sounds incredibly reasonable. Bring in a coalition of international troops to stand between the two sides, monitor the borders, and ensure no one attacks the other. Boom. Problem solved.
But the community immediately points to the structural realities of international mandates, and they specifically use UNIFIL, the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, as the counterexample.
This is so crucial to understand. The users pointed out that UNIFIL is this massive, internationally funded peacekeeping force stationed right there in southern Lebanon.
Yep.
And it has completely failed to stop Hezbollah from entrenching itself, building massive tunnel networks and firing rockets into northern Israel.
And the mechanism of that failure lies entirely in the rules of engagement and the international mandate itself.
How so?
Well, peacekeeping forces like UNIFIL, they generally operate under severe constraints where they can only use force in self-defense.
Okay.
They do not have the sweeping authority, the mandate, or, frankly, the political will from their home countries to proactively engage in brutal urban combat to forcibly disarm a heavily entrenched militia.
Right. They're going to send their own citizens to die kicking down doors in sovereign territory to seize rocket launchers.
Exactly. So they end up functioning as a highly visible, incredibly expensive observer force that essentially just watches the militant infrastructure be built around them.
Which means that from the perspective of an Israeli security planner in 2026, handing over the security of the Gaza border to an international coalition is viewed as just a catastrophic non-starter.
Right. If the international community couldn't enforce disarmament in Lebanon, there is zero trust that they could enforce it in Gaza.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you combine that deep structural mistrust of international institutions with the historical baggage of the pre-2023 strategies, you get this global atmosphere of intense, almost radioactive cynicism.
Oh, radioactive is the right word.
Now, as we dive into source 6 from our stack, I want to be incredibly clear to you listening. We're looking at some highly charged fringe political literature here.
Very fringe.
Yes. And we are analyzing this material strictly to understand the absolute extremes of the global discourse and the vitriol this leader generates. We are not in any way taking sides or endorsing the validity or accuracy of these unverified quotes. We are just impartially reporting what is being said out there.
Right, because the utility of looking at fringe literature isn't to find historical fact, It's to measure the psychological temperature of the international public.
Exactly.
And the temperature regarding Netanyahu is one of profound, deep-seated suspicion.
The texts attribute these incredibly cynical, manipulative quotes to him. For instance, they claim he privately refers to his fervent Christian Zionist supporters as, quote, useful idiots.
Well,
Basically suggesting he views their deep religious backing as nothing more than a geopolitical tool to be exploited.
right.
And then there's another unverified quote from 2002 that claims he bragged about his ability to manipulate American foreign policy, allegedly stating, quote, once we squeeze all we can out of the United States, it can dry up and blow away.
Yeah, and, whether those quotes were ever actually uttered in a back room is almost secondary to the fact that they're widely circulated and believed by a significant portion of the global public.
Right. The belief is what matters.
Exactly. It demonstrates that his every action is viewed through a lens of extreme bad faith. Large segments of the international community assume that his foreign policy is driven entirely by cynical manipulation and personal political survival, rather than genuine statecraft.
It's the crumple zone metaphor we talked about earlier. But the audience assumes the driver is intentionally crashing the car just to collect the insurance money.
That's a great way to put it. And if you take that pervasive, deeply rooted cynicism and you apply it to the breaking news of August 2026, the Trump Board of Peace proposal, you instantly see why the geopolitical community is reacting the way it is.
Oh, absolutely. The reaction on the geopolitics subreddits to this 15-point plan is merciless.
They tear it apart.
They really do. They are dissecting it not as a serious diplomatic breakthrough, but as this performative weekend deal.
Yeah.
They're pointing out the sheer absurdity of the core mechanism, demanding that an entrenched insurgency disarm before a military withdrawal, while the military refuses to withdraw until the insurgency disarms.
It is a classic geopolitical standoff, just dressed up as a peace treaty.
Right.
A serious, durable peace agreement requires months, often years, of meticulous back-channel negotiations to establish sequencing. Like, who moves first? How is it verified? What are the enforcement mechanisms if a party breaches the agreement?
But the Trump plan doesn't solve the standoff. It just loudly announces the standoff at a press conference and calls it a victory.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the stark reality on the ground.
Yeah.
While the politicians debate the impossible sequencing of a flawed 15-point plan on television, the actual military apparatus is sitting quietly on the yellow line.
Right, controlling the 53%.
Securing the lateral corridors and managing the conflict on their own pragmatic terms, entirely detached from the political theater happening in front of the cameras.
So what does this actually mean for you? Like, why dedicate this much time to understanding the labyrinth of Middle Eastern policy and the mechanics of Qatari cash transfers or UN mandates?
It's a valid question.
Because this entire situation is a masterclass in reading between the lines of global affairs. It proves that the headlines flashing across your screen, the dramatic rejections, the historic breakthroughs, are often just the smoke.
They really are.
Yeah.
True geopolitical shifts are tectonic. They are the result of decades of brutal, calculated decisions. They are defined by the mechanics of leverage, the realities of geography like the yellow line, and this inescapable truth that leaders will consistently create massive gaps between what they say to survive politically and what they do to actually secure their borders.
You can never take a press conference at face value. You always have to look for the structural realities operating beneath the rhetoric.
Absolutely. And as we look at the immense structural barriers, the decades of historical baggage, and the deep-seated bad faith that defines this conflict, it really leaves us with a critical, overarching question about the nature of conflict resolution itself.
Right. If the entire architecture of a peace process relies on the signatures of leaders whose political careers, whose very survival instincts, have been forged entirely in the management of perpetual crisis.
Can a genuine, durable resolution ever actually be engineered from the top down? Or does the weight of history and the mechanics of political survival dictate that true peace will only be possible when an entirely new generation of leadership, unbound by the failed strategies and the deep cynicisms of the past, finally takes the wheel?
That is definitely something to deeply consider the next time a historic breakthrough dominates your news cycle. Keep your eyes on the reality on the ground and keep questioning the headlines. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.